recording now. And we're on. Excellent. Did everyone have a chance to watch the video that was sent out earlier?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
we watched it.
Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. Well, what were your initial thoughts? Jonathan already said he thought he liked this guy, or I don't know, you said you liked him better, but he was easier to follow than the guy last week. What are your other thoughts? Anyone have any initial thoughts about it?
Seemed really irrelevant to what we're, what's the word? Relevant to what's going on today, I thought.
Right.
With the outer storms he was talking about and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm helping Barb. I'm helping Barb get in. I'll be right back.
Okay, excellent. I'll watch for her on the side. Bill invited a friend tonight, so we're waiting for her to come in. But I thought it was interesting. I watched this video after I recorded last week's sermon, and I thought it was interesting that the two very much related. I thought with the whole idea of where is God. I can't put my finger on where is God in this. I can't see God's place in this. So I thought that was interesting. The two really did go hand in hand.
Yeah, I thought you picked it because they were so similar.
Well, it was, I mean, once I watched it, I thought, yeah, I watched several to pick one, and I thought, oh, this really is a good one. But no, that it was, that was a total God thing that the two of them were so for.
Hey, you're having a hard time getting in, I see.
Hopefully she'll find her way in.
What you can do is just
Right.
go to the link.
I'm going to mute him for just a second so we can chat on, and we'll unmute him when he comes back. So at the very beginning of the video, he made a comment about the outer storm and the inner storm. When we're in these outer storms, inner storm, right now, I think the whole world's kind of in this outer storm. It's things happening outside of outside of our lives that definitely bump us around. But we also have had experiences of inner storms, those things that people may not even know. When they look at you, they may not even know this is happening. Those things that tear you up from the inside. Have you had an experience that you want to share, or you can just nod yes, I know, where you had to question, where is God in this?
I'm back.
I think that's actually a pretty common question for most people, because we're going through some pretty tough times throughout the world, not just, what we're dealing with right now. And it's hard to understand, how wars come to mind, how these things really fit into the plan. It makes you wonder, what is the plan?
Mm-hmm.
The scriptures always said we never know the time or the place. We just have to place our trust ultimately in God, that God knows what's going on, knows what he's doing or she's doing. And, we never know. We just have to continue to live our life in faith. That's the way I approach it. It is scary. It's frightening. We just have to continue to trust that God's going to be the one that's going to straighten it all out eventually.
Mm-hmm.
So, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Marcia, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was just thinking that, how guilty we are, about, we greet people at church and everybody says, oh, I'm just fine. And they're not. And sometimes you're not either. But, there's something about putting on a good face, a secure face, a brave face, if you will, that you just don't always want to tell everybody everything. I can remember going through a period of depression back in the 80s that I didn't want anybody to know. I saw it as a sign of weakness. That, I'm not in control. Lord knows I want to be in control. And I think that, you know, it was very short-lived, about 6 months, but I think that God was telling me, you're not in control all the time. And, you know, and to be vulnerable and to be empathetic towards others. You know, if I learned anything from that experience, I think that's what I learned. And it's not easy to be vulnerable and to trust people enough to come out and say what's really on your heart.
I think with that though, do people have the time to spend with you if you really let go of what's bothering you?
No. No. No.
It depends on the relationship you have with that person. If the person is really, really concerned, they will be willing to stay with you and to listen and to move forward with you. I had friends like that who, they didn't care what I was going through with all the stuff that's been going on. And, you know, they just went on. But there have been those who, like Katina, she stayed with me through all of this. My friend Barb, others as well have done that. But those who I considered good friends, I found out really weren't friends. They weren't willing to listen. They weren't willing to support. They weren't willing to be there. You know, and that kind of bothered me.
Yeah, that's one of those sort of internal struggles when you're watching the people around you sort of not stand up with your relationship, not be the rock that you were hoping them to be. That's a tough struggle when you feel like you don't have anyone to lean on. Marcia mentioned control. How does our illusion of control play into this idea of God should somehow get involved in solving our problems? How does our control balance out with that, with our need for God to jump in there and fix it?
They used to say, and some people still do, you know, God helps those who help themselves. And, you know, that's biblical. I don't think so.
I don't know, if you read Judges long enough, I think you'd come to that conclusion.
But you know, do we ever let go? You know, I think about people saying things like, "Oh, I'll pray for you," like that's nothing, and yet it's probably the most important thing that we can do for someone. To listen, certainly, Bill, but you know, if you really do pray for somebody, and there are people who they call them forward prayer warriors, and I think that's a gift. That's something that some people can do, and they really do pray for you, and it makes a difference.
I agree with that. If somebody's taken time out of their day to think about someone else so much that they're going to take the time to pray for them, that, I mean, you can't care for someone in a better way than that.
Yeah.
Is it hard for those of us with control issues to turn it over to God, to trust God's got this?
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I see a lot of nodding heads.
I want to fix everything, and I can't fix it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get angry when God doesn't do what we want him to do either.
Or quick enough.
Or quick enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that, I guess, is one of the things that the guy in the video talked about a fair bit, was being able to understand those things that you can have some impact on or control, and those things that you can't. And if you keep butting up against the things that you can't control, trying to control them, it's going to wear you out.
I think about the situation we're in right now. I mean, Lord, you know, to not be able to go and do, and, you know, is this the new reality that we're in now? I don't know.
For a time.
For a time. How long?
For the time.
Yeah.
I think
How many of you are like me and saying, I need to know when? I need to know, are we talking April 30th? Are we talking May, you know, into May? Are we talking next year? I need to know when. And I get
That's
so
my
frustrated that I don't know.
That's my nephew.
We can't make plans.
Yeah.
You can't make plans. You can't build anticipation for things.
Right.
And it's just a total loss of control. It's completely turning over the control to forces outside of yourself.
Right.
Which is hard.
Absolutely hard. You know, when you thought, you know, when it started, you think, oh, a couple of weeks, well, we can do that. But it's, who knows how long it's going to
Watch
be.
these curves that keep going up and up, and you think, oh my God.
Yeah, it looks like it'll be a lot more than a couple of weeks. Plus, I don't know about you, but this couple of weeks has felt like the longest couple of weeks ever.
Really has.
And so without my regular schedule, I don't have any idea what day it is.
what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, how are you with children making out? You know, it seems like that would be almost harder than.
I'm surprised I still have hair. We're okay.
I've seen things online. I get children's ministry emails, and there's always all kinds of things for you to do with your kids. And I thought, well, that'd be a good thing. You know.
I was pretty ambitious the first few days. Now I'm like, screen time, it's fine.
I think it's easier when the weather is nice. You can still go outside a little bit. I mean, yesterday I watched the grandkids, and it's like, okay, we'll do this. Okay, now we're gonna do this, and okay, now you can watch TV for a little bit.
We have a backyard, and I'm like, I don't know how people that live in apartments with little kids are making out, because our backyard is our saving grace right now.
Yeah.
Oh, I know that my kids in Colorado, Sam and Jen, are going crazy because both of them are on complete lockdown because, as I told you last week, she was exposed to the coronavirus. And as a result, they've had to stay at home. She can't go anywhere. She has to be retested again next week. Mm-hmm. So, because the first test was not a good one. So she has to go back in once they get the new kits in and be tested again. But she's been locked down completely. And Aiden, who needs an awful lot of therapy and so on, hasn't been getting the therapy he needs in order to continue to develop and to overcome stuff. And they're going absolutely bonkers trying to figure out ways to keep him occupied, provide him with the therapy that he needs. And Sam texted last night, "Help, Dad, what do I do?" I said, that's questions I've always asked myself over the years, what I do with you. I think it's what parents go through all the time, you know, when something like this comes along. There's a part of me wishes I was out there. I know that.
I think this is a whole new to everybody because nobody knows anything, and there's nothing from the school. There's nothing that was said what to do. So I think they're all all in, everybody's in new territory there.
Yeah.
I know that in Ohio, they really were much more prepared for this. Governor DeWine had put together a program that was to go statewide if they had something like this happen with education. And it was already in place when all this began. And so they really haven't lost that much in terms of school because the kids had already been prepared for it. And they spent time teaching them how to do it when they were at home and at school. And now they're into it. And it seems to be working. He's connected with these major corporations and groups and so on to give them the information they need and the technology they need, and have offered free computers to those homes that don't have them. So
Yeah, we
he
didn't
was a
have
wise
that
man.
transition. We weren't transitioned at all, you know, that when they have school on that Thursday, they just didn't go back. And they're going back the next day, you know.
And that's hard.
Yeah.
Especially that's up your schedule, especially if you work too, I'm sure. So.
Yeah, it's hard.
Well, with education the school, everything is different right now. With church, everything is different right now. The way that we're doing our grocery shopping is different. The way we pump our gas, everything is different right now. And this may not even be, this is, something to think about. This may not even be the primary struggle in somebody's life right now. But, right now this is consuming me. But, my neighbors may be dealing with something completely different. And so that's an important thing to remember too. But I thought this was timely when he talked about the lack of control, because that is, I feel like everything is out of my control right now, that I have, I'm grasping onto what I can control because it's so little. But he suggested it's time to let go of the road and to practice just letting go of that control. And he mentioned the using the steps of the Alcoholics Anonymous. And I know most of us have not gone through that program. Some have. And so, but if you're not familiar with it, the first step in the Alcoholics Anonymous is to admit that you are powerless, to admit that you are unable to control whatever this is. Obviously in AA, it's over alcohol, but this, he suggested this could be used for whatever situation you're struggling with. So with it, if we're talking about the COVID-19 crisis, or, a sibling who is, doing wrong by the family, whatever it is, the first step would be admitting you cannot control that. That is outside of your own control, which is tough. And then the second step being that although we are out of control, that doesn't mean that the situation is completely out of control, because then the second step is to admit that there is a power, in the church we call it God, but there is a power greater than us that is in control of all things. And then the third step is to make a decision to turn over our own will to that greater power, to God. So admitting we don't have control is step one. Admitting God does have control is step two. And step three, making peace with that and saying, okay, God, I give this to you. I turn this over to you. So think about in your own lives, have you ever consciously or subconsciously made that decision to turn something over to God, to say, I can't do this. I'm laying this at your feet, Jesus. Have you ever had to make that decision? And if so, what does that feel like? How hard is it?
Yes, several times, and it's scary as all get out.
Mm-hmm. Is it an easy cut and dry process? Today I decide I'm doing it and tomorrow it's done?
No.
Oh, that it would be.
It's never cut and dry. There's always extenuating circumstances. But when it got to the point where I couldn't do it anymore, I said, okay, I've had enough. It's your turn. Take over. And just let go of it. And within 2 or 3 days, things kind of calmed down. And it got better and better and better. It got to the point where I just couldn't take it anymore. And I said, okay, God, you put me in this situation. You've got to take care of it. And just let it lay, let it go. And that's what I tried to do when anything like this comes along. And there have been enough of them in the last several years that I've gone through with that, you know.
Let go and let God is an expression.
It's kind of like the song from Frozen, let it go, let it go, let it go.
The surprise hit.
Yeah, well, that is very true. I think the song that she sings in that particular moment was very true. She had to let go of the past in order to embrace what the future will be. And in Frozen 2, that became really, really more apparent when you watch the second one.
Oh, a movie I've got to watch now.
Next week's video, Frozen 2.
Better Frozen 2 than 2 Frozen, I guess.
Well, and the song she sings that is Into the Unknown. That's the title of the main song. Into the unknown. She's letting go and walking into a future. She doesn't know what's going to happen. And she trusts that something will happen and moves forward. And that's essentially what the texts in there that he was talking about are saying we have to do. When he was talking about the disciples in the boat, you know, they thought Jesus was the one who was going to solve the problem, but he was showing them there's a different way, moving them into moving beyond just trusting in Jesus, but also trusting in the one who has the ultimate power beyond themselves. So that's the way I heard what he was saying in that.
See, I only want to trust if I know the outcome is going to be good. If it's going to get bad, I'm like, I don't know. Still need to try to fix something here.
And maybe a timeline too. I need to know it's going to be good, and I need a date. By when?
Because if you tell me 6 or 8 weeks, I could do anything for 6 or 8 weeks. If you tell me you don't know, I'm like,
Right.
I don't know that I've ever decided to hand it over to God. Like, there have been a lot of situations where I've decided just to back off and see what happens. And usually that's the right decision in those cases. So I guess that's kind of the same thing.
I think sometimes there's no choice in it either.
Well, there is that.
So, I mean, you know, when Michael was diagnosed, it's like, first I'm like freaking out. Now what? Now what? Now what? And then there's nothing I can do. I just have to go through with whatever is happening. So, you know, panicking doesn't help, or fretting about it just makes the whole relationship then bad. And so there's
goes from bad to worse in that situation.
Right. And I can say that now because it's kind of over, you know. But I mean, I remember lots of times in the beginning, it's, you know, people say, "Oh my gosh, you're going through that." And it's like, well, it's going to happen. Whatever's going to happen. There's nothing I can do. Just be there in the moment.
What is our responsibility once we've gone through steps 1, 2, 3, turn it over to God? Then what? What is our responsibility in this? What's our job?
Be a cheerleader.
Be a chair reader?
Well, that might work. Cheerleader.
A cheerleader. Okay.
Go, God, go.
I think it's to find moments of peace and joy, and you can usually get there with gratitude.
I think it gives you an opportunity to look at things in a different way too. That, you know, once you've let go and you see what really is going to happen, you go, "Oh man, I wouldn't have done it that way, but that's so much better." Yeah.
That happens a lot in life, I find.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah.
And sometimes the answer that we want is not the answer that we get.
No.
Sometimes the answer we get is the better answer.
Yep.
Well, Marcia mentioned her depression, and that was a long, difficult process. getting through that.
It was really hard on him.
And there was just no, I guess the main thing we had to do during that time was just persevere, because there really wasn't any explanation for it or talking one out of it or something like that. Even understanding what it was difficult at that time. So we had to persevere through it for an indeterminate length of time. I don't even remember how long it was, but
it was too long.
It was a long time.
And for some people, it's ongoing.
That's absolutely true, Bill, and I am so grateful that, you know, and I can look back on it and I can say things like, well, you know, that year my granddad died, my dad died, my son got cancer, I started a new job, graduated from college, you know, hello.
Hey, enough's enough.
12 cups of coffee a day. None of those things were good. Is that what caused this depression? I don't know, but you're right, Bill. There are folks who deal with it year after year after year, and I guess that's why I said I think God gave me that, because I always, before I had the depression, I always thought, oh well, you just pull yourself up by your bootstraps and you're going to be just fine. And God said, no, gotcha.
That's what society says. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps and you'll be fine. That's not necessarily so.
No, it's not.
And I've dealt with depression now for almost 30 years. And it has just, there were times when it just about killed me. And, you know, a lot of people don't realize it, you know, that you may be feeling depressed. Outside, you look like you're a bubbly individual, but inside there's turmoil.
Yeah.
And, you know.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, there is.
How does going through one of these experiences, being able to turn it over to God, how does that change you as a person on the other side of it? Or does it change you? Do you feel like this experience we're going through right now will change us?
Yes, I think it will. In the long run, it may take a while, but I think the relationships that we continue to maintain and recognizing that we're all in this together is what's going to change us and what's going to move us forward.
Well, I certainly hope that's true.
As long as you've got people in place who are willing to think the same way, I think we'll be fine. But the problem is, I get the feeling we don't have people in place that know what they're doing and don't seem to care. I'm sorry, that's just my own opinion.
Well, I'm grateful for Zoom and for church videos, and I love the idea of texting people and calling people and you know, giving them the peace of Christ in some small way. Thank you, Katina, for doing that.
Yes. I've appreciated your texts and prayers that you've sent me by texting and things like that. I've appreciated the worship services, especially. They've always been very timely and appropriate and filled with a message, you know, this unbelievable messages, you know. How you do it, I don't know. You have the gift, girl. You have the gift.
Well, I know this will change me, that the things I took for granted, like I said a couple weeks ago in my sermon, like I see it. I mean, I see the things that were just right in front of me and I just wasn't paying attention. It's there now. That I think is huge to you know, the things that I took for granted to be more aware of. I also feel this is an interesting side effect, I think, that the social distancing has actually deepened my connection with several people in the congregation, that calling and texting and checking in on people, there's something about talking to people one-on-one that you don't get in a busy church situation, where people will stop and talk, and I have had just really, really fruitful conversations, and I think that's something that I will carry out of this as well. Is these sort of deepened connections and an awareness of those people who were getting lost in the everyday shuffle of our church, we just assume you're going to show up and you're going to participate. And when you can't show up to church is trying to show up for you. And that's met needs for people who are not.
Yes.
So that's really interesting as well, I think. So for me, this lack of control has been infuriating, but I can already see, even though it's not over yet, I can already see the changes taking place for me and for the church as a whole.
It is a different reality.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked what he was talking about when he was talking about how life begins in darkness.
Oh, I have that clip for us to watch. Shall we do it? That was my favorite part too. That one really, really spoke to me. Let me see if I can. All right, let's see here. All right, did it pop up on your screen?
Uh-huh.
Something's coming.
Yep. Oh,
Something's coming.
Something's coming.
There it is.
I had it queued up, but it wasn't. Okay, should start right here.
Not getting any sound.
Oh,
No audio.
Nothing yet.
still no sound?
No
Yeah.
sound.
Well,
Looks like it's loud on your end.
yeah, I can hear it. I can hear it just fine. It's great. Let's do that. Well, now it won't even play. What is it doing? Well, you may just have to remember it. I was hoping we could watch it together and discuss it. But he does say that you can watch that on your own later on, because I don't know why the sound wasn't working. It starts about 4:35, and there's about a 15-second clip that I think is really, really powerful, where he does say that life begins in the darkness, whether it's in the womb or under the ground, that life begins in the darkness. And you can imagine that if you were that tiny seed planted in the ground, things look pretty hopeless and pretty grim when the whole new life that's ahead of you is just inches away. And that's really, I thought that was a really powerful image. I think I love that it spoke to you too, Marcia. Have you ever felt like you were waiting in the darkness? Are you aware when you're in the darkness that how close you are to life, to new life?
I don't know if you know when you're in the darkness how close new life is. Bill, you might be able to speak to that as far as depression is concerned.
There are times when the darkness is so overwhelming you can't move, you can't act, you can't even think,
and you don't see what's on the other side at that point.
Right. Yeah.
You can't tell how long it's going to be any more than we know how long this virus is going to last.
Right.
Yeah. As a mate, I can't talk her out of it either.
Right.
Lead her out of it.
I think that was the hardest thing, was to, as hard as Paul tried to help to bring me out of that, the kinder he was to me, the meaner I was to him. And awful. It was just awful.
Sometimes we are meeting to those around us who are trying to help.
Oh, gosh.
Sometimes we don't want the help. And sometimes it's something you have to do yourself. It can't be done. Somebody wants to help and they can't. They just don't understand what's going on up here or down here.
No.
In the head or the heart, either one. I was trying to remember the one writer that helped me more than anything else to overcome some of that depression. Can't think of her name now. She said sometimes just sitting in a dark room can help you overcome the depression, because you are looking for those moments when light comes. And that's what he's talking about in that video. Even though life begins in the dark, there is that moment when suddenly there is a light at the end of the tunnel. You know, we hear that term all the time. Even though it seems dark right now, there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. We may not be able to see it yet, but it's there. And I think that's where faith comes in, knowing or trusting that that light is always there and it's always going to be there, even if we can't see it or experience it right now.
I think that's true.
He mentioned a practice. I don't know if he said it in the video. I don't think he did, but in the I sent you the study guide as well. I think he talked about via negativa, which is Latin, which literally means the way of the negative. But he is asking us to get to the positive by way of the negative. So going through, this is not running away from. This is not a denial. You know, when things feel all bad, there's no reason to deny that. There's no reason to say, well, it's not so bad, or you know, when you're in the middle of a depression, you're in the middle of a serious diagnosis. It's not helpful to say it's not so bad, because it is. It is so bad. It is so bad. But what this practice is to actually walk into that darkness, actually walk into that dark place. Allow yourself to go there and sit in that darkness and look around and say, okay, here I am in this horrible, awful place. What's good here? And it's a scary thing sometimes to walk into the darkness, knowing I'm going to look around and see bad. But the goal is to look around and see the bad and pick out the good, because it's still there. It's just not so easy to see. So I ask you, we're all in this common darkness right now, and you're welcome to use a different darkness if you want, but this was one that we're all sharing right now. What's good? What's good in this darkness? I look around and I see plenty of bad. I see plenty of things to complain about on Facebook. What's good?
The funny memes.
We walked on the trail up above Norris Dam on Sunday, and it was glorious.
Really nice.
I highly recommend it. It's not a well-used trail. We only came across 4 couples in the time we were up there. It's a 3.2 mile hike, and the wildflowers are absolutely glorious.
Okay.
Trillium the size of dinner plates.
Oh, wow.
Red ones.
Red trilliums usually is white
I
in this
know.
area.
We have red ones there.
There are red ones up there. Jack in the Pulpit. And, oh, they're just incredible.
Creation is definitely showing off for us right now. I think it's beautiful outside, which is a very welcome thing.
I was so afraid our cherry tree out front wasn't going to bloom. I walked out yesterday morning and it was in full bloom. I mean, it's just a huge, 20-foot tree. It's nothing but solid pink, just absolute gorgeous pink. And I'm going, thank you.
I
And I noticed today the dogwoods have burst. So the dogwoods are almost ready to bloom. It'd be in full bloom. They'll probably be in full bloom by Sunday or even middle of next week. So, and that's a big thing around here, the dogwoods. I think it's one of my favorite flowering trees in the spring is the dogwood. That and the redbuds.
I think it's amazing what people come up with in this time to do, for the kids or what it may be. We did the Easter egg hunt and the windows and the bear hunt and just little things like that. I think, we're not just bound at home. We can still go out because the air is still okay.
Air is fine.
So.
Yeah, neighborhoods are coming together with these Easter egg hunts and bear hunts. And our neighborhood had a sidewalk chalk decorate. You decorated your driveway for an art show. Becca's neighborhood, I know, is doing. They have neighborhood dance parties where they turn music on and dance in the streets. And I think that's really sweet. So the neighborhoods are coming together in ways they have not. We've lived here 2 years and we've only met a few neighbors, and all of a sudden we're meeting people, even though we're in social distancing. So isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
What else is good?
we're blessed to have enough food and a warm home to live in. I think about how much harder this would be if you were in a refugee camp or, any homeless. What are the homeless folks doing?
Well, anybody that can't buy what we can, I mean, as much as we buy, they buy really just for that one meal a day. They showed it on TV today with I don't know exactly where it was. I think it was I don't know if it was in Mexico or further down. Like, the poor people, they can't hoard food like we do.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Time to read and work jigsaw puzzles and.
I think one of the lights for me is the responses of the first responders, the nurses, the doctors, the EMTs who have to take somebody to the hospital. Their positivity and wanting to be there even though they know they shouldn't be. They're willing to risk their own lives to be there. I think that's, as Fred Rogers used to say, he says, if you're looking for God, look for the helpers.
Mm-hmm.
The presence of God, look for the helpers. He was an amazing man, and he's become very popular again. I don't know if you've noticed here lately, but he's suddenly come back. PBS is now running his shows on a regular basis again.
And he suddenly looks like Tom Hanks.
Assuming the world goes back to normal, we're going to do Mr. Rogers Bible School this summer.
Oh, is that right?
Wow, cool.
Right.
I'm thinking what it does to our environment, not with all the traffic gone.
Yes. Have you seen all those maps of how China's air is clearing up? And
ours is too. They were saying today that the air here, even here in Knoxville, it has changed completely with the fewer number of cars on the road and so on.
Interesting.
How have your kids handled, Heather?
What was that?
How have your kids handled all of this?
The kids are fine. I don't think they have even noticed really that anything is going on. I mean, Libby misses school, but if I let her look on the iPad, she's okay with it.
Okay.
But we've had a lot of meals together: breakfast, lunch, dinner, more time to rest, more time to exercise, more time to read. I mean, there are some positives for sure for us.
I think the family time is the slow pace and the family time.
Yeah, the slow pace. We haven't experienced it since I've had children. We haven't been slow, and this has been really interesting that we have time to cook meals and sit down and eat them, and that we actually talk. I mean, normally we're eating food on the way out the door, and we're talking and playing games together. That's been really lovely.
We're doing garden boxes that we have been saying that we were going to do for about 5 years. We're working on those, so.
So there is good in this darkness, and I think it is a fruitful practice to invite yourself to go into the darkness, sit there and look around and ask, what is good here? Because you will almost always find something, however small it might be. And I think the author of our series was getting to the point where to say, that is where you'll find God. When you say, where is God exactly? We'll look around and find the good. God is in the cherry blossoms that are blooming and promising us of the resurrection and new birth and new life springing up everywhere. God is in the connections we're building with our neighbors and our church family. God is in the relationships in our own homes where we are deepening those connections and slowing down. And God is in the slow pace that we can actually sit and actually listen for God's voice. That God is most certainly here. So, not to minimize that which is bad, there certainly is much suffering associated with this. But if we're willing to walk into that suffering and look around, God is there indeed. What last thoughts do you have? What do you want to add?
Keep this going.
Yes, I actually thought it might be nice to have a church Zoom call with no purpose other than just sit down with some coffee and just catch up with people and say, hello, how are you? Just to see each other's faces. I think sometimes people are intimidated by a study. They think, oh, I'm going to have to answer a question, or, I have to watch the video first or I'll get shamed. And so maybe if we just had an open Zoom call just to come in and say hi and come and go as you please, that might be a nice thing.
Yeah.
To say hello.
I've been thinking too that, since this is the new reality, that it wouldn't hurt to start the Thursday morning Bible study again. And it'd be easy to send out the readings by email and Zoom a Bible study on Thursday mornings. Have Sunday school class on Sunday morning. I'm missing my boys.
You probably won't catch them on Sunday mornings because they're sleeping. We haven't seen
make
a
it
morning.
anytime you want now.
That's the other thing that's happened in this house. I mean, we're laying in that bed till 9 o'clock in the morning, and we kid ourselves that we're listening to the news. What a bunch of nonsense!
Well, my teenagers aren't necessarily even getting up in the AM, so they're sleeping on. So
Okay.
yes, but that's all part of slowing down. I think maybe a little rest was necessary. So good for all of us. Yeah.
Give me a chance to catch up on the books that I've let play on the side without touching. So I set a goal for myself on Goodreads this year of reading 110 books. I'm not up to 54.
Whoa!
Hey, you're right. Easy.
On
You'll
track.
make it this year, Bill.
Huh?
You'll
What'd you
make
say?
it this year.
Maybe. I made it last year. I set the same goal last year.
Good for
So
you.
we'll see. That's my problem. I read too much.
Well, how can we pray for each other? Do you have things you'd like to lift up?
Well, I think for all the people that are not able to work or that will have to work. I don't know if I have to go to work. My stepdaughter got laid off now, so so all those people that are now in the unknown, what's going to happen? The essential workers, what an essential worker is. At least I thought we did, but so for everybody that doesn't know what's going to happen now, so.
Any other requests, prayer requests, or joys or concerns?
I guess that God would put on our hearts who needs a call, or who could should we send a meal to somebody? And we're getting ready for Family Promise, and we're talking about how to do that with them sequestered in place at the day center. How can we help each other, or are we down to the prayer and texts and is that what we're supposed to be doing?
I think here in Knoxville, our numbers are actually pretty low. But I have sisters who live in basically the New York metropolitan area, eastern Pennsylvania, as far north as Maine, and they are just getting hit really hard and are very, very worried.
Yeah. I have an aunt in a nursing home in Pennsylvania, and she said today that as of tomorrow, all their meals will be delivered to their rooms. They won't even be able to leave their rooms.
Yeah, that's what's happened in the home where my mother is.
Yeah.
It's happening in all the nursing homes. They did that in Ohio 2 weeks ago. So
I can't imagine the loneliness of that, being stuck in your room, and most of those folks don't even have the capability to Zoom call and text and that sort of thing.
this is true.
So maybe
And
a
we
call
can't even go see them.
somebody that in a nursing home, or a card, or
one of the things that a friend of mine in Indianapolis has started doing, she's sending cards to all of her friends. She's reinstating the old-fashioned way of letter writing and sharing ideas, thoughts, feelings, and so on in a letter. And so she sent me one this week, and I sent one back to her. I think it's the one I showed you, Katina, of the dogwoods that I had done for her. And I sent it to her, and she texted back to me. She says, "Send me more."
Well, I think there's a lot to be said for the cards and letters that we send out, because that's something that people can hold in their hand. And I mean, calls and texts are nice, but there's something about having a piece of paper in your hand that says, "I love you."
Yeah.
Maybe I'm old-fashioned, huh?
Could be.
Or just old, I'm not sure which.
Well, we've gotten out of the habit of writing letters.
We have.
You know, and sending cards to people. We now do it electronically. You know, we don't take time to sit down and actually write a letter to somebody. We send them an email, or we send them an e-card. I've gotten really in the bad habit of sending e-cards for birthdays instead of actually sending them a birthday card. It's so much easier just to do an email than to go out and buy a real card.
Well, our grandson Zachary's birthday was yesterday, and Paul and I sat down on Sunday morning before church.
Oh, was after church.
Oh, was that after church?
Yeah,
Anyhow, we actually made him a card, which was a whole lot of fun.
Yeah. One of the things that Jennifer put on Facebook the other day was having the kids make cards to send to people in nursing homes. Jennifer Lane had posted that. She's been looking for ways to keep her grandson occupied in all of this, because she's become the primary caretaker. And so she and Lucille have been struggling to keep him occupied. So, but I thought that was kind of a neat way to do things, to teach them compassion. To share something they might have. The kids might be willing to do that.
Well, this is a wonderful time. I love seeing all of your faces, hearing your voices. I feel closer to you when we're here, so this is good. We'll keep this up on Wednesdays for sure, and try to find other ways to stay connected. But let's close with prayer, and then you all are welcome to stay and chat if you want to, or if you haven't eaten supper yet, you're welcome to go on as well, whatever works for you. But let's pray together. Almighty God, we acknowledge that you are in control. And as much as it pains us to say it, we acknowledge also that we are not in control. And so, God, we give you thanks that you have our best interests at heart always, and that we can turn things over to you, knowing that you have us firmly in the palm of your hand. And we ask that you would help us to move toward that complete surrender to you, that we might acknowledge that you are there and let go of things that are holding us down. God, we ask that you would help us to walk into the scary places, into the dark places, and look around and see what is good and feel you near us there. God, during this time of confusion and this time of the wilderness, we ask that you would be with those who are less fortunate than we are, those who are not able to find shelter or food, those whose jobs are uncertain or completely gone, those who are struggling to pay bills, and those who are maybe even getting sick or losing loved ones. And we ask that you would just draw near to them, that you would hold them firmly and give them healing and give them comfort and give them a way out of the wilderness. And God, we ask that you would help us to always be on the lookout as to how we can be your hands and feet. If we can bring meals, or if we can send a card, or make a phone call, or somehow reach out to someone who needs us, that we can be part of something like Family Promise that never closes, that is always available to do your will. We just ask that you would use us in whatever way that you would like, so that we can be your hands and feet here on earth. And God, we give you thanks for all that is good, for all of the light places here in the darkness. And we give you thanks for a slow pace so that we can stop and listen for your voice and spend time with our loved ones and actually experience some recreation. We give you thanks for all of that. And we ask that you would help us to not take those things for granted when this wilderness comes to an end, that we might see more clearly all of the blessings that you have put in our path. God, we lift all of these things up to you in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you, Katina.
Thank you all. This was great. Bill, tell your friend we're sorry we missed her.
I'm getting ready. She just texted me, please call me.
Okay, well, hopefully next week then.
Yeah, she says go try again next week. We'll try and figure out what went wrong.
You got a week to figure it out, so sure.
Okay. Okay.
All right, we can do a practice call sometime if you want. We can set one up and let her practice that. So, all right, you all have a good week. Good to see you. Take care.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
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 Marla, give Joseph my